Hi, so today I'm going to explain to you about the process of discovering the Americas. We're going to start in the timeline from around pretty much 1492 for when they started discovering the Americas. But when I'll be explaining the European background, we'll go a little bit before the 1492s most likely. My name is Victoria Gong, and I'm excited to be teaching you today. Okay, so as a quick deck summary, first of all, this lesson will follow Common Core 5.2 and 5.3. And students will learn about early explorers and their explorations in America. They will also learn about what was happening in Europe during this time. I'll also give a brief overview about the treatment of Native Americans, which is part of Common Core 5.3. The target age is 5th graders, but I am going a little bit more in depth, so if you're a 6th grader watching this, it's all okay. Skills acquired, you'll understand why European nations wanted to explore the Americas. You'll know what made exploration to the Americas possible. You'll understand the positive and negative effects of the Columbian Exchange, and you'll be able to analyze the poor treatment of natives and the effect of it. Okay, so right here I have a couple of good videos to watch. These are not necessary, but they would be very good in giving you some extra background information if you're interested in the subject. So the first one will give you stuff about Christopher Columbus. It's very good to learn about the first voyage to the Americas, which happened in 1492. The second link is to existing settlements. It pretty much gives you a nice overview of your Native Americans, the existing ones that were already here, and what pretty much happened to after the Europeans took over. The third would give you the relationship between the Native Americans and settlers. I'll go more into this as well in the slideshow, and I think the most important one would be to click into the third one because it's part of Common Core 5.3, and I'm only going to be briefly going over it. Okay, so let's go over the first few explorers. So the first one is Christopher Columbus. He discovered the Americas, and he actually, if you look at the red pointer right here, he landed right here. He didn't actually land in the United States, as some people might believe. He actually landed in the Bahamas area. Okay, the next explorer is Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. He led an expedition from Mexico, so right here, to parts of the southwestern United States. He pretty much just ran around and he kind of just traveled through this little area. Well, not little, it's a very large, expansive piece of land. The third explorer is Hernando Cortez. He conquered the Aztecs and he explored a large part of Mexico. So he took over the Aztecs and he ended up sending a lot of the gold and silver he found back to Europe. And this is actually what sparked further expeditions into the Americas. Ferdinand Magellan, he did not actually go to America, but he is part of the reason why Columbus felt the courage to come across the Atlantic Ocean. So what Magellan did is he was actually the first one to go around the entire globe. So he knew that the entire world was interconnected by oceans, and this brought a lot of inspiration to further explorers that would come on later on. Ponce de Leon, he was part of the Spanish crew, and he discovered Florida, which is right here. So now we're going to talk about Christopher Columbus. So Christopher Columbus came and landed in the Caribbean in 1492. He wasn't actually attempting to come to America. This was an unknown landmass at the time. He truly believed that when he came to America that he had landed in Asia, because his initial desire to come here was because he wanted a faster route to Asia to come to the spice trade. But as we know, he landed in America instead. And this is another part of why he called the Native Americans Indians. Indians are not the correct name or term to call them, is not Indians, because the correct term would be Native American. But he believed they were Indians because he believed he landed in Asia. So the only reason why Christopher Columbus was able to come on this voyage was because Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain sponsored his voyages. He actually initially, I'm pretty sure he went to Queen Elizabeth and asked for her support. However, she rejected him, and so he tried to look on for different sponsors. A big part about Christopher Columbus that I think people should know about is how poorly he treated the Native Americans. He's actually given the quote of starting the transatlantic slave trade. So a big part of that is after he arrived in the Bahamas Caribbean area, he actually sent Native Americans back to the to his mainland, and he sent them back to Europe, and they ended up working as slaves there. And additionally, he ended up he needed someone to do the labor work in his colony or trading post that he set up, and so he began using natives as this forced labor. And this was the beginning of coerced labor in the Americas. And after this, the natives began dying off because as the Europeans came to America, they brought a lot of disease with them, which ended up with lots of Native Americans dying from the disease. And this was a terrible effect of the Europeans arriving in America. And because so many of the Native Americans were dying off, they ended up needing to export African Americans from Africa into the Americas to work as their coerced labor. As you can tell, there's something that says more information. It's a link. And if you want to click on it, it'll be a great way for you to get more information about Christopher Columbus. So now let's cover what did explorers want. So some people like to say the 4 G's, or you could do 3 G's. But the 3 G's, if you want to say it, would be gold, God, and glory. I like to add 4 G's because I like to add in goods. So first, I'll talk about gold. So a big reason why Europe wanted to come to America, or Europeans wanted to explore America, was because they wanted to get richer, they wanted more wealth, and so that could easily be, you could easily get wealthier with the discovery of gold. The second G, God. Many Europeans wanted to spread their religion, and they thought they were helping what they believed were savage natives, and they were converting them to the rightful path of God. The third G is glory. So a lot of explorers or conquistadors are people who came from Europe in hope of conquering other nations, such as the Aztecs or Incas, in hopes of making themselves seem more powerful or earning glory, which is the third G. The fourth G, this is the one that some people say, some people don't. However, I think it's very important. Goods. So a big part of it is, as you see later on, the usage and importance of cash crops becomes more and more important, such as tobacco or cotton, and we see how much these goods can influence the economy of the Americas and how much they help the mother country of Europe, such as we know, Britain. They heavily benefited from the trade of goods between the Americas with cotton imports and tobacco imports. So all 4 of these G's were very important and part of the reasons why so many European nations sent explorers to America. Okay, so this is the Columbian Exchange. So let's look. So first we have from North America to Europe. Most of these items were in fact just simply produce, such as different food, as we see like the classic we have the avocado, we have potatoes, and we think of potatoes as a staple European food. However, it actually didn't arrive until around the 1500s when the potatoes were brought back to Europe. And then we have from Europe, and parts of Africa were also contributing to the spread to the Americas. We see a large amount of disease, and this pretty much destroyed the Native American population. This is one huge negative effect of the Columbian Exchange. We also see a variety of different foods that were brought over. And we also see a big part of the change, livestock, especially the horse. I personally feel like the horse probably affected life in the Americas heavily for the natives, because they ended up being able to use the horse as a way for transportation, because in the Native American land, they didn't have any large livestock to help facilitate transportation or trade. So the introduction of livestock was huge for them. I think another thing that needs to be noted that I forgot earlier was that from the Americas to Europe, we see the introduction of tobacco, which became a very important cash crop, and it made some people very wealthy. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the treatment of Native Americans. So I think a big part that needs to be known is that Native Americans did not usually want to give up their land, or they didn't want to do the manual labor for the Europeans. They were coerced into do it, and they were treated very poorly under this. They were used for manual labor. I personally feel like this system is incredibly similar to slavery, and this was actually the first instance of slavery from the Europeans used in the Americas. And some Native Americans would try to fight back, and they would try to claim their land back, but they almost always ultimately lost their battles because of European superior weaponry. So one big advantage that the Europeans had is they had gunpowder. Gunpowder gave them guns, it gave them cannons, and no matter what you have, if you only have bows and arrows and human firepower, you cannot beat a gun or any gunpowder weaponry. So a big reason why the Native Americans were treated so poorly was because Europeans had this incorrect mindset that natives were unworthy savages, and they believed that they were more powerful and that the Native Americans deserved to be treated poorly and be used for manual labor. And because of this incorrect negative thought belief, many Native Americans were treated very poorly and worked to pure exhaustion. And this was very awful because many of them had to give up their culture, their lifestyle was completely uprooted, and their culture was destroyed. Another effect of Europeans arriving to Native American land is that they forced them to convert to Christianity, and the Native Americans would have to give up their native religion. And Europeans would set up little missionaries to convert them. Sometimes conversions worked, sometimes they didn't. There's some very varying results that occurred. So we also have a different set of Native Americans who were purely conquered. This was in the case of an already powerful existing civilization that a European nation destroyed. The two most important examples of this are the Aztecs and the Inca. The Aztecs were conquered by Cortez, and the Inca were conquered by Pizarro. So in both cases, their rulers were killed, and if their people attempted any rebellion or any sort of rebellion, they would be met with death. The conquistadors later became pretty much their death sentence because they would take they took their culture away, they took their gold, they took away their lifestyle, and then they would use these conquered natives to do their labor. One big place that the natives ended up having to do labor were in silver mines. Silver mines became the area where many natives were forced to work because these silver mines brought wealth to people. They would bring a lot of wealth to the mother country, such as Spain or Britain, whichever country they were bringing back to. Okay, so what really made exploration possible? Because there's a reason why exploration happened after the 1490s. Like there's a reason for all of this. So these are the 6 big changes that made this all possible technology-wise. We see the compass. So the compass had been around for a couple thousand years, but the difference is this was a new innovation, the magnetic compass, which would connect to the Earth's magnetic field, and this was much more accurate, and this would help explorers know exactly where they were going and help them navigate across the ocean, which was a very large benefit. Now we see new ships. So new ships, some of them are called the Carack or the Carabel, and they were able to store much more supplies, and they could travel a lot faster. A big part of this was they got new sails on new sails, like things that boats have, and you know what a sail is. And so these sails would be able to much more efficiently harvest the wind, and so these ships could travel more efficiently and travel faster. Next, we have the astrolabe. So this was used to calculate latitude, and if you could know exactly what latitude you were at, you could more accurately use the maps you had. Next, we have gunpowder. So gunpowder is more about the conquering of nations, which furthered the desire for exploration to happen. So gunpowder allowed the conquistadors and explorers to dominate the Native Americans, which gave them the incentive to continue to take over land because they knew they had a labor force behind them. Then we have new maps. So improvements to cartography. Cartography is the study of maps. It led to explorers knowing where they were. We combine this pretty much with the astrolabe because if you know your latitude, you can more effectively use your new map. There's also a lot of new knowledge in this world. People had a better understanding of wind patterns. So the Atlantic Ocean has a wind pattern called the trade winds. These trade winds are always there, they always go in a certain direction, and once you have a good understanding of these winds, your ship can travel much more efficiently because you know which winds to harvest with your new sails. So a big part about this is what was happening in Europe during this time. Okay, so let's first take a look at the Protestant Reformation. So this happened in Europe in the 1500s. A lot of people began disagreeing with the Roman Catholic Church, which had been a very powerful part of Europe for a very long time. So the Roman Catholic people disagreed over certain religious issues and criticized the church's great power and wealth. So these people broke away from the Catholic Church and founded various Protestant churches. And then this all started after Martin Luther, he pretty much spurred this whole event when he wrote 95 Theses. In this, he actually, I think he literally like tacked it onto the door of the Roman Catholic Church, and he wrote this huge paper, and it was printed everywhere. It was mass printed, and everybody began to read it, and they agreed with his thoughts. So Martin Luther spoke out against indulgences and simonies. So indulgences was where the Roman Catholic Church would let you buy forgiveness for your sins, and Martin Luther was like, this isn't right. You can't buy your sins. You have to follow God and his will, and if you do the right things, then you can be forgiven. He was also very against the action of simony. Simony was where the Roman Catholic Church would allow people to buy positions of power in the church for money. So all of these actions caused the Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation is actually the Roman Catholic Church way of coming back and changing their system and getting rid of the corruption pretty much. So after this, members of religious order known as the Jesuits, they would spread Catholicism through their teaching and missionary work. This is a big reason why many missionaries were set up in Americas, because people wanted to take in new members to make up for those that were lost. Another big thing is that from 1545 to 1563, a Catholic body known as the Council of Trent, they made a lot of changes to the Catholic Church in an attempt to correct its problems, and this actually worked out quite well. The Spanish Reconquista. This is actually a big reason why Columbus was sponsored. So for a long time, for around 800 years, Spain was occupied by Muslim powers, and they had this huge power shift of Spain trying to reconquer their land. But it took until around the 1490s until they actually were able to solidify their power, and Spain was actually able to fully extinguish the Muslim powers that were in their state. And the Reconquista is the name given to the long series of wars that I described between the Christian kingdoms and the Muslim wars for control over the Iberian Peninsula. And this is the Iberian Peninsula, which is just Spain. And then after the Reconquista was completed, Ferdinand and Isabella, this was King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, unified Spain. And because they were a new country, a new state, they wanted to validate their power, and so they supported Columbus and his explorations and hoped that this would bring power and validation to their new country. So another reason why so many people went to the Americas during this time is because they had this huge rivalry in Europe. So there was this belief during the time called mercantilism. This was the belief that there was only a certain amount of wealth in the world, and the only way for your country to become wealthier is if you have more exports than imports, which means you have more products going out of your country than you're taking in. Because when you put out products, people are spending money to buy those products from you. So you are making more money, you're collecting more wealth. And because of this belief, countries in Europe thought that colonies were only meant to support their mother country. So once again, we see the Americas being used to export crops to the European nations. So another part of the rivalries was the desire to gain power. And back then, power was represented with land claims. So Spain and Portugal fought to conquer more land in the Americas. Britain and France claimed land around the northern parts of Americas, and they did this because they were racing to find a Northwest Passage. The Northwest Passage was the hope that they could find some sort of waterway to bring them to Asia through the north of the Americas. So now we're going to look at European exploration of the Americas. So first of all, we have England. He sends out Cabot in the 1497s. He lands somewhere in Canada, and he ends up setting a couple up trading posts, but they don't end up having a huge impact up here, and they also did not find the Northwest Passage that they were initially hoping for. Then we have France. France sends out a couple of expeditions by a couple of different people, and during this, they end up claiming a good amount of land in Canada, and that's pretty much their land claims. Then we have Spain. Spain ends up doing a lot of voyages. So Spain has Magellan, who's the first to navigate the entire globe. They have Columbus, who's the first to land in America. They have Ponce de Leon, he's the first to discover Florida. They have Cortez, who conquers the Aztecs. They have Cabeza de Vaca, who also conquered a different nation. They also are the first to go around the coast of California. And then they have a couple others that come into South America. They have Pizarro, who conquered the Inca as well. Then we have Portugal. Portugal was actually very big on discovering as well. They had Vasco da Gama. He's the first to actually go around the, I'm pretty sure he's the first to go around the Cape of Africa. And these are all very important. And Spain and Portugal both end up claiming different amounts of land in South America. So now we have European land claims in America. So once again, we see the English with this huge amount of land up here. France actually ends up taking a good portion of this away from the English later on. We see the original 13 colonies right here. Oh, my bad. This is 1763. So this is after the English have happened to pretty much take back their land claims here, and the France are left with only this little area. The Spanish have a huge amount of land currently. This stretch of Louisiana eventually goes back to France, but this little Louisiana section, it's actually huge, sorry, it actually eventually gets bought by the original 13 colonies. We see this little area of Alaska owned by Russia. And then we see the bottom parts of South America. Also, I believe that this map is more accurate in my belief, and just in the general time period that I was trying to talk about. The blue we see is the Spanish. They had a huge expanse of land. By this moment, the Louisiana section is owned by France. This will eventually be given to the English colonies. The English colonies do, in fact, still, in this time, it's still owned by English because it's around 1750. And they have a huge amount of land up here, but they also just have the English colonies here. We see the Portuguese with Brazil claims, and this little section of the Amazon, it's still unclaimed because it's very difficult to get through the Amazon. So now we're going to go over a quick check. When did Columbus first discover America? 1492. Where did Columbus first land? He first landed in the Caribbeans. Who did the Spanish reclaim their land from? This is in the Spanish Reconquista. They reclaimed their land from the Muslim Moors. 4. Who sparked the Protestant Reformation? Martin Luther. 5. How were Native Americans treated by Europeans? They were treated horribly by Europeans, and they were used as free labor. Number 6, what does a compass do? A compass connects to the Earth's magnetic field, and it can give directions to north, east, west, and south. 7, what is mercantilism? Mercantilism is the belief that there's only a certain amount of wealth in the world. 8, what happened as a result of the Protestant Reformation? We see the counter Reformation movement. Then we have 9. What was one negative effect of the Columbian Exchange? We see a lot of disease come from the Afro-Eurasia world into the Americas, which ends up killing a large amount of Native Americans. 10. What made European nations want to claim more land in America? Once again, we get the little thought that European nations were huge rivals and they always wanted to be wealthier and wanted to beat out the other nations. So if you want some extra reading, I've linked a couple of articles here if you would want to read. We have more about Columbus, we have more about the Native Americans, and we have more about early settlements from Europeans in the Americas. So thank you for watching. I'll be making more videos for you. If you need to contact me, my email is on the bottom. I love to hear requests if you have any. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you learned from me today.